My husband tossed the termination papers onto the glossy conference table, his other arm wrapped tight around his secretary's waist. They smirked, believing they had just ousted a troublesome consultant to seize total control. They forgot one deadly detail from our founding contract 10 years ago. I am not just an employee. I am the board chairman holding 60% of the shares, and I am the only one who can sign this company's death warrant. My name is Rachel, and I walked into the glass-walled conference room on the 45th floor of the Vortex Innovations headquarters with a stack of financial reports pressed against my chest. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the gray Chicago sky threatened snow, mirroring the cold sterility of the boardroom. I was 36 years old and had spent every waking hour of the last decade building this company from a basement startup into a tech titan. I assumed this meeting was a standard review of our quarterly earnings, but the atmosphere inside the room shifted the moment I stepped across the threshold. The conversation died instantly. At the head of the mahogany table sat Derek, my husband of 12 years, and the face of this company. He was 42, handsome in that polished, superficial way that looked good on magazine covers, but his eyes held a cruelty I had chosen to ignore for too long. He was not alone. Perched on the armrest of his leather chair was Jessica, his 25-year-old personal secretary. Her hand rested possessively on his shoulder, fingers toying with the collar of his suit jacket. They were laughing at something whispered between them, a private joke that sucked the air out of the room for everyone else. I placed my files on the table, ignoring the pitying glances from the marketing director and the head of sales. "I have the projections for the third quarter," I said, keeping my voice steady. Derek waved a hand dismissively, not even bothering to look at the papers. "We are not here for the numbers, Rachel. We are here to discuss the image of Vortex, and frankly, you are hurting it." He leaned back, interlacing his fingers behind his head. "Look at you. That suit is from 3 seasons ago. Your hair is a mess. You walk around here like a library ghost haunting a tech firm. It is embarrassing. Vortex is about the future. It is about energy and youth. Jessica here gets it. You are just outdated." Jessica giggled, a sharp, metallic sound. She slid a single sheet of paper across the polished wood toward me. It was not a report. It was a termination notice. "It is just a restructuring. Rachel," Jessica said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy that barely masked her triumph. "Derek and I agreed that the company needs a fresh direction. Your consultancy role is being eliminated effective immediately. You know how it is. We have to trim the fat." "Trim the fat?" I repeated. I looked at Derek. He smirked. That arrogant tilt of his lips that used to charm me. Now, it just looked pathetic. My mind flashed back 10 years. I remembered sitting in our cramped apartment, eyes burning from staring at a monitor for 20 hours straight, writing the foundational code that made Vortex possible. Derek had been out drinking with his fraternity brothers that night. He had come home stumbling and smelling of cheap beer while I was debugging the algorithm that would eventually buy him his Ferraris and this skyscraper. He was the showman. I was the architect. He seemed to have forgotten that the foundation supports the penthouse, not the other way around. "You are firing me," I stated flatly. "Don't make a scene." "Rachel," Derek snapped, his amusement fading into irritation. "Just sign the acknowledgement and go. Honestly, you should be grateful. Now you can go home and be a full-time mother." "Isn't that what you women always whine about wanting?" I did not scream. I did not throw the heavy crystal pitcher of water at his head, though the urge was there. Instead, I picked up the paper, folded it neatly, and placed it in my pocket. I turned to the side table where I had set my things. I unfolded a small cardboard box I had kept in my briefcase. Into the box went a framed photograph of us with our daughter, Lily. It felt heavy in my hand, a relic of a life that was now officially dead. Next, I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer and pulled out a sleek, matte black hard drive. I placed it gently into the box. Nobody noticed it. To them, it was just another piece of tech junk. To me, it was the nuclear launch key. Security. Derek barked into the intercom. Escort the former consultant out of the building. Ensure she does not steal any office supplies. 2 uniformed guards entered, looking uncomfortable. They knew me. They knew I was the one who asked about their kids and signed off on their holiday bonuses. But they had their orders. "Ma'am," one of them murmured, looking at the floor. "It is fine, John," I said softy. "I am leaving." I walked out of the conference room, flanked by the guards like a common criminal. I could feel Derek and Jessica's eyes boring into my back, practically vibrating with their victory. They thought they had just cut off a gangrenous limb. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped onto the busy Chicago sidewalk. The wind hit me instantly, biting and frigid, whipping my hair across my face. People rushed past, heads down against the cold, oblivious to the woman standing there with a cardboard box. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the icy air. I expected tears. I expected the crushing weight of heartbreak. But as I stood there, watching the traffic crawl by, I realized something terrifying. I was not sad. I was not broken. The suffocating weight of trying to save a marriage that had been dead for years was gone. The burden of propping up a man who despised me had vanished. I looked down at the black hard drive nestled in my box. A slow, cold calmness settled over me. It was the calm of a surgeon picking up a scalpel. They wanted a war. They had no idea I had already built the battlefield. I steered my 10-year-old Volvo station wagon up the winding driveway of the suburban estate that Derek loved to brag about at cocktail parties. He called it his castle, a testament to his success as a CEO. He conveniently forgot that the deed to this house, like the deed to the land it sat on, bore only one name: mine. I had bought it with the dividends from my initial patents, money I had earned before Vortex Innovations even had a logo. Through the front window, I saw my daughter, Lily. She was 6 years old, sitting on the rug with her nanny, building a tower of blocks. Her innocent laughter filtered through the glass, a sound so pure it made my chest ache. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Derek could take my office. He could take the credit, but he would never destroy her world the way he was trying to destroy mine. "I promise you, baby," I whispered to the empty car, my voice trembling slightly. He won't take anything else from us." I bypassed the main house and went straight to my home office, a converted carriage house in the backyard that Derek rarely entered because he found it too boring. I locked the door behind me and sat at my desk, the silence of the room wrapping around me like a shield. My mind drifted back 12 years. I was 24 then, a brilliant but painfully shy programmer who preferred the company of servers to people. Derek was an economics student with a smile that could sell ice to a polar bear and a resume full of buzzwords but empty of substance. I built the technology. I wrote the code that revolutionized data compression, but the thought of standing on a stage and pitching to investors terrified me to the point of nausea. "You be the face, Rachel," he had told me back then, holding my hands in his. "I will handle the sharks. You just create. I will protect you." I believed him. I made him the CEO so I could stay in the shadows, raise Lily, and work in peace. I handed him the spotlight, the magazine covers, and the glory, but I was not naive. I was a coder, and coders always build back doors. When we incorporated, I created a dual-class share structure. Derek never bothered to read the 50-page operating agreement. He just signed where the lawyers pointed, too busy ordering custom business cards to notice Article 9. It stated that while he held the title of CEO, the original founder retained a golden share, a 60% voting right on all decisions regarding the sale of assets, mergers, or executive restructuring. I possessed the ultimate veto power. I was not just a shareholder. I was the firewall he could not bypass. I pulled the matte black hard drive from the cardboard box and plugged it into my secure terminal. This wasn't just a backup of my files. It was a direct line to the God mode of the Vortex internal network, a monitoring system I had installed to track productivity, which now served a much darker purpose. I typed in my encryption key. The screen flooded with data. I bypassed the standard logs and went straight to Derek's private communications. I expected to find love letters to Jessica, hotel bookings, perhaps some jewelry receipts. I found those, of course. But what I found next made my blood run cold. There was a draft contract with Apex Corp, our biggest competitor. No, I breathed out, leaning closer to the screen. You couldn't be that stupid. But he was. The documents were damning. Derek was not just restructuring the staff, he was preparing to sell the source code of our flagship software, the very heart of the company, to Apex for $40 million in cash. He was gutting the company to line his own pockets before fleeing. The deal was scheduled to be signed in 5 days. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The scene in the boardroom, the public humiliation, the termination. It wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. He needed me out of the building. He needed my access revoked so he could transfer the intellectual property without me noticing. He thought firing me stripped me of my power. I watched a video clip from the security camera in his office, recorded just 3 hours ago. Derek was on the phone, pacing. "She is gone, Mike," Derek said to the person on the other end, his voice boasting. "Yeah, kicked her out today. She has no clue. The deal goes through next Tuesday. I want the money in the Cayman account by noon." I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. The sadness was entirely gone now, replaced by a sharp, icy clarity. He thought he was playing chess, but he didn't even know he was on the board. "You want to sell my soul for $40 million? I said to the pixelated image of my husband. "Go ahead, Derek. Try it." I sat in the glow of my 3 monitors, the silence of the room broken only by the hum of the hard drive and the frantic clicking of my mouse. I was no longer a wife or a mother in this moment. I was a forensic auditor, and I was dissecting the corpse of my marriage to find the cause of death. I pulled up the general ledgers for the last 2 years. Derek had always assumed I was too busy raising Lily to look at the granular details of the accounts, but he forgot that I wrote the accounting software he was using to steal from me. "Let's see where you buried the bodies," I murmured to myself, my fingers flying across the keyboard. It did not take long to find the anomalies. I filtered the expenses by external consultants, and a pattern emerged immediately. There was a recurring monthly payment of $15,000 to an entity called J.S. Strategic Solutions. I ran a quick background check on the tax identification number. It was registered to a residential address in downtown Chicago, an apartment that I knew for a fact belonged to Jessica. "You are not even trying to hide it," I whispered, shaking my head in disbelief. I dug deeper. Under the budget code for research and development, which was supposed to be funding our next generation of cloud servers, I found invoices that made my stomach turn. A receipt for a $20,000 Hermes Birkin bag was listed as hardware storage solutions. A week-long trip to a 5-star resort in the Maldives was categorized as an Asia-Pacific Market Expansion Summit. I clicked on the itinerary. There were no meetings, only spa treatments and a private yacht charter for 2. My phone buzzed with a notification from the server. The email archive download was complete. I opened Derek's sent folder and searched for Jessica's name. Hundreds of emails flooded the screen. I clicked on one dated 3 days ago. "Baby, don't worry about the old hag." Jessica had written, "She is so out of touch. Once the Apex deal goes through, you can serve her the divorce papers and we will be on a plane to Paris before she even realizes the company is gone. I can't wait to be Mrs. CEO." "Old hag," I read aloud, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I minimized the email and pulled up Jessica's personnel file. I needed to see her face. The ID photo on the screen showed a younger, fresher version of the woman who had smirked at me in the boardroom. My heart hammered against my ribs as recognition truly set in. 3 years ago, she had been a sobbing mess in the lobby, a broke college student who had lost her financial aid. I was the one who stopped. I was the one who listened to her story. I was the one who personally authorized a scholarship fund to cover her tuition because I saw a spark of ambition in her. "I paid for your education," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and grief. I bought the clothes on your back." She wasn't just a stranger. She was a project I had nurtured. The betrayal felt less like a stab in the back and more like a rot from within. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Rachel, it is almost midnight." Harrison grumbled. "Wake up, Harrison," I said, my voice turning steel hard. "I need you to start drafting, and I don't mean a divorce settlement. I want a full criminal dossier." "Criminal?" Harrison asked, the sleep vanishing from his tone. What did he do? Embezzlement? Fraud? Misappropriation of corporate funds? I have the receipts. Harrison, I have the flight logs. I am sending you a secure link right now. If you have proof. Rachel, we can bury him." Harrison said, "But are you sure you want to go this route? It will be public. It will be ugly." "I don't want a quiet separation." "Harrison," I replied, "I want to burn his world down." I hung up and turned back to the screens. I needed one last piece of leverage. I accessed the security camera archives for the executive suite. I scrolled through the footage from the past month until I found it video from last Tuesday, inside Derek's office. It showed Derek and Jessica engaged in acts that were definitely not professional. Right on the desk where my father's picture used to sit. It was a clear violation of the morality clause in his employment contract. "Got you," I said. Now it was time for the first strike. I logged into the corporate banking portal. I saw the active status of the company credit cards the black card Derek used to impress his friends, and the platinum supplementary card he had illegally issued to Jessica. I moved my cursor over the Report Lost or Stolen button. "Have a nice dinner," I whispered. I clicked the mouse. The status on the screen flashed from active to suspended fraud alert. It was a small action, just a click of a button, but it felt like the first shot in a war I intended to win. While I sat in the darkness of my home office, miles away in the city center, Derek and Jessica were concluding what they believed to be their victory lap. They were dining at Le Ciel, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Chicago, a place where the tasting menu cost more than most people earned in a month. I knew exactly where they were because the transaction alerts on my phone had been pinging all night. They had ordered the vintage Dom Perignon and the beluga caviar. They were celebrating their freedom from me, clinking glasses to a future financed by my hard work. The bill arrived. It was for $4,200. I imagined Derek's arrogant smirk as he casually tossed his matte black American Express Centurion card onto the silver tray. He likely didn't even look at the total. To him, money was an infinite resource that simply flowed from the company tap. 5 minutes later, my phone stopped pinging with transaction approvals. Instead, I received a notification of a declined attempt. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. The waiter, embarrassed but firm, returning to the table. He would lean in close to whisper the bad news so as not to disturb the other patrons. "I am sorry, sir," the waiter would say. "The card was declined." "Don't be ridiculous," Derek would snap, loud enough to turn heads. "Run it again. Your machine is broken." They ran it again. Declined. Then Jessica would step in, playing the supportive partner, pulling out the platinum card I had stupidly authorized for her use 3 years ago. "Use mine, babe," she would say, handing it over with a flourish. That transaction was declined instantly with a refer to issuer fraud suspected code. My phone buzzed. It was Derek calling the bank. I had already authorized the bank to record all calls for security purposes, so I logged into the portal and listened to the audio stream in near real time. "This is unacceptable," Derek screamed at the poor customer service representative. "Do you know who I am? I am the CEO of Vortex Innovations. Unfreeze my cards immediately." "I apologize, sir," the operator replied, her voice calm and detached. But the primary account holder, Ms. Rachel, reported these cards lost or stolen approximately 20 minutes ago. Per bank protocol, we have secured the accounts to prevent unauthorized use. "She is not the primary holder," Derek roared. "I am her husband." "The account was opened in her name 10 years ago, sir," the operator stated. "You are listed merely as an authorized user. Have a good night." The line went dead. A moment later, a text message lit up my screen. It was from Derek. "You petty, vindictive bee. Turn the cards back on right now, or I will make your life a living hell. You are embarrassing me." I looked at the message. I did not feel fear. I felt a cold sense of amusement. I typed a single response, a bright yellow smiley face emoji. Then I held down the power button and turned my phone off completely. According to the gossip that reached me later, Derek and Jessica were forced to endure the ultimate humiliation. They had no cash. They had to call Gary, a junior analyst from the finance department, to drive all the way to the restaurant with $5,000 in cash to bail them out. The entire waitstaff watched them, whispering behind their hands. The other diners, many of whom were potential business partners, saw the great CEO unable to pay for his own dinner. While they were waiting in shame for Gary to arrive, I executed the next phase of my plan. I compiled the evidence I had gathered: the fake invoices, the travel logs, the emails calling the board members dinosaurs into a single PDF file. I attached it to an email addressed to every member of the board of directors, excluding Derek. Subject: urgent, financial irregularities and ethical concerns at executive level. I hit send. By tomorrow morning, the seeds of doubt would be firmly planted. 2 hours later, headlights swept across the front lawn. Derek was home. He was drunk, furious, and looking for a fight. He stomped up the front steps and punched the code into the smart lock. The keypad flashed red. "Access denied." He punched it again, harder this time. "Access denied." "Rachel!" he screamed, pounding his fist against the solid oak door. "Open this door." "This is my house." He stepped back and looked for a rock to throw through the window, but before he could bend down, 2 large shadows stepped out from the darkness of the porch. I had hired them an hour ago from a private security firm. They were former military, towering men with crossed arms and zero patience. "Sir," the larger guard said, his voice like gravel, "you need to step off the property." "Who are you?" Derek slurred, swaying slightly. "I live here. Not anymore," the guard replied. "The homeowner has revoked your access. If you do not leave, we will detain you for trespassing until the police arrive." Derek looked up. I stepped out onto the balcony of the master bedroom, wrapping my silk robe tighter around me against the night wind. I looked down at him, the man who had looked down on me for a decade. "Rachel," he yelled, spotting me. "You can't do this. Where am I supposed to sleep?" I didn't answer. I just watched him. For the first time in his life, Derek was on the outside looking in. He was powerless, homeless, and cut off from the wealth he thought was his birthright. I turned around and walked back into the warmth of my room, leaving him in the cold. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating violently on the nightstand. I picked it up and saw a notification that Derek was live on social media. I clicked the link. The screen filled with Derek's face. He looked disheveled, wearing the same clothes from the night before, sitting on a park bench with red-rimmed eyes. He was putting on the performance of a lifetime. "I don't know what to do anymore. Guys," Derek said into the camera, his voice cracking theatrically. "My wife. She is having a breakdown." She locked me out of my own home. She won't let me see my little girl. I am terrified for my daughter's safety right now because she is just not stable. I scrolled down to the comments section. It was a bloodbath. Thousands of comments were flooding in, all repeating the same few phrases. Poor guy. Stay strong. Derek postpartum depression is no joke. She sounds dangerous. She is just a jealous, old witch trying to ruin a successful man. It was obvious. Jessica had hired a click farm. These were not real people. They were paid bots designed to destroy my reputation and paint me as a hysterical woman. They wanted to provoke a reaction. They wanted me to go online and scream back so I would look exactly like the crazy ex-wife they were describing. I did not type a single word. Instead, I put on my sharpest navy blue blazer and drove downtown to meet with the senior editor of the Chicago Business Chronicle. While Derek was playing to the gallery of internet trolls, I was speaking to the people who actually controlled the money. The interview lasted 2 hours. I did not mention the affair. I did not mention the lockout. I kept it strictly professional and devastatingly cold. The issue at Vortex is not personal. I told the reporter, my voice calm and authoritative. The issue is that under current management, operational efficiency has dropped by 18% in 2 quarters. Decisions are being made based on vanity rather than data. Investors should be asking why the R&D budget is being drained while product development has stalled. When the article went live online at 2 p.m, the impact was immediate. It was a serious analysis of corporate mismanagement, backed by the subtle hints I had dropped about financial irregularities. The Vortex stock price, which had been steady, began to wobble. By closing bell, it had dipped 4%. Derek began panic dialing the major shareholders. I could imagine him sweating in his temporary hotel room, trying to explain away the numbers I had just made public. While he was putting out fires, I drove to a quiet coffee shop on the edge of the city to meet Arthur, the chief financial officer of Vortex. Arthur was a nervous man with a mortgage and 3 kids in private school. When he saw me, he looked like he wanted to bolt for the door. "Rachel, I shouldn't be here," Arthur said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "If Derek finds out." "Derek is a sinking ship." "Arthur," I said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "And he has tied you to the anchor." Arthur opened the envelope. Inside were copies of the loan documents Derek had submitted to the bank last month to cover his gambling debts. "Look at the signature line." "Arthur," I said. Arthur's face went pale. That is my signature. But I never signed this. I never authorized this loan." "I know," I replied softly. "He forged it, which means when the SEC investigates, you are going to be the one facing 10 years in federal prison for fraud, unless you help me." Arthur looked at the document, then at me. His hands were shaking so badly he had to put his coffee cup down. "What?" "What do you need me to do?" he stammered. "I need access to the inner circle," I said. "I need to know his next move before he makes it." Arthur took a deep breath. "He is planning a gala, the Vortex Future Gala. It is scheduled for this Saturday. He announced it internally an hour ago. He told us it is a celebration of the company's success. But I heard him on the phone with Apex. He plans to sign the acquisition contract live on stage during the event. He wants to make it a spectacle so the board can't back out. He wants to sign the death warrant of my company in front of the entire city." I asked. "Yes," Arthur whispered. "He thinks it will be his crowning moment before he takes the payout and leaves." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "Let him have his party," I said. "I love a good show." The courier arrived at the gate at 10 o'clock in the morning, delivering a heavy cream-colored envelope. I opened it to find an invitation to the Vortex Future Gala. It was not a VIP pass. It was not a board member credential. It was a general admission ticket, the kind usually reserved for junior vendors and interns, seating them at the back of the room near the kitchen doors. Attached was a sticky note in Jessica's looping. Childish handwriting thought you might want to say goodbye. She really thinks she has won, I whispered, running my thumb over the cheap paper. It was the ultimate insult, a final attempt to put me in my place before they erased me completely. But they had made a critical error. By inviting me, they had given me exactly what I needed access to the building. I went to my dressing room, ignoring the rows of sensible gray suits Derek had always criticized. I reached into the back, pulling out a garment bag I had not opened in years. Inside was a dress I had bought for an awards ceremony that Derek had convinced me not to attend because he said I would look awkward. It was a floor-length gown of liquid silver, sharp and armored, designed to catch every light in the room. Tonight, I would not be the library ghost. I would be the Blade, while Derek and Jessica were likely picking out vacation homes in the French Riviera. Convinced that the sail to Apex was a done deal, I was executing the final phase of my plan. I drove to a nondescript internet cafe in the city suburbs to meet with Sarah, the lead engineer of Vortex. She was one of the few who knew that I wrote the original kernel of the software. "Is it done?" I asked, sliding a cup of coffee across the table to her. "It is," Sarah replied, her voice low. "I injected the patch you sent me. It is a logic bomb, Rachel. The moment Derek tries to transfer the repository keys to Apex, the system locks down. It reverts to the original copyright protocol. It will display the ownership metadata on the main screen." "Perfect," I said. "And his access? He has admin privileges on the interface only," Sarah explained. "But the core that is bio-locked to you. He never knew because he never tried to code anything in his life." My phone buzzed. It was Harrison. "The paperwork is airtight," Harrison said, his voice gruff but satisfied. "I have the original patent filings from 12 years ago, the ones predating the incorporation of Vortex. You own the IP personally. Rachel, the company just licenses it from you. If Derek tries to sell the software, he is selling stolen property. I will have the cease and desist orders ready to serve the moment he steps on stage." "Thank you, Harrison," I said. The trap was set. Yet, across town, cracks were starting to form in their confidence. I checked the internal chat logs through my backdoor access. Jessica was messaging Derek incessantly. "Derek, people are looking at me weird," Jessica wrote. "The developers stop talking when I walk into the room, and I saw Arthur sweating in the break room. I have a bad feeling about this." "Stop being paranoid, babe," Derek had replied, his arrogance practically dripping off the screen. "They are just jealous. Tomorrow we are rich. Relax." I went home and found my daughter, Lily, playing in the living room. I sat down and pulled her into my lap, smoothing her hair. She looked up at me with big, curious eyes. "Why are you wearing that scary face?" "Mommy?" she asked. I softened my expression, kissing her forehead. "It is not a scary face, sweetie. It is a brave face. Mommy has to go do a big job tomorrow." "Are you going to clean the office?" she asked innocently. "Yes," I answered, a tight smile forming on my lips. "I am going to take out a lot of trash so our house can be clean again." That night, as the clock struck 11, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the darkened screen of my phone. I could picture Derek and Jessica in a hotel suite somewhere, popping champagne, toasting to their brilliance. I decided to send one final ripple through their calm water. I typed a message to Derek. "Enjoy tonight, because tomorrow you will have nothing." I hit send. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned off the light and lay back in the darkness, listening to the wind howl outside, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. The storm was coming, and I was the lightning. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a sea of black ties and designer silk, illuminated by crystal chandeliers that cost more than my first house. Derek had spared no expense for what he believed would be his coronation. He stood near the champagne tower, holding court with a glass of vintage bubbly in one hand and Jessica's waist in the other. She was wearing a crimson dress that was a little too tight and a little too bright, clearly enjoying her role as the queen consort of Vortex Innovations. They looked like the perfect power couple, basking in the adoration of investors who had no idea they were about to be robbed. I waited until the room was at maximum capacity before I made my entrance. The heavy double doors swung open, and I stepped onto the plush carpet. I was not wearing the sensible gray suits Derek despised. I was draped in a floor-length gown of liquid silver that shimmered like mercury under the lights. I had styled my hair in sleek waves and wore the diamond earrings my grandmother had left me, heirlooms Derek had tried to make me sell years ago. The chatter in the room died down, rippling into silence from the entrance inward. Heads turned. I saw jaws drop. The library ghost, the background wife, the outdated consultant had vanished. In her place stood the true architect of the empire. I walked through the crowd, the sea of people parting for me, their whispers following in my wake. Derek's smile faltered when he saw me. He looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Jessica gripped his arm, her knuckles turning white, her eyes darting around the room as she realized she was suddenly invisible. I walked straight toward the VIP circle where Derek was talking to Marcus Sterling, the CEO of Apex and the man about to buy my life's work for $40 million. "Derek," I said, my voice smooth and projecting clearly over the low hum of jazz. "You forgot to save a dance for your wife." Mr. Sterling turned to me. He was a shark of a man, sharp-eyed and ruthless, but he knew quality when he saw it. He looked from Derek's sweaty forehead to my calm composure. "I don't believe we have met," Sterling said, extending a hand to me while ignoring Jessica completely. "Rachel," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "The majority shareholder." Derek stepped between us, his face flushed with panic. "Rachel, you are drunk. You need to leave. Security." He hissed the last word, trying to keep his voice down, but I just laughed. It was a light, airy sound that terrified him more than a scream would have. "I am perfectly sober, darling," I said, stepping around him. "I am just here to witness the historic moment of my company. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Before he could call the guards, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The master of ceremonies announced that it was time for the signing. Derek glared at me one last time, a look that promised retribution before adjusting his tie and leading a pouting Jessica up the stairs to the stage. I took a seat in the very first row, crossing my legs and looking up at them. Derek took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we usher in a new era. With this signature, Vortex joins the Apex family, securing a future of innovation." He sat at the antique desk placed center stage. Mr. Sterling sat opposite him. The contract lay between them, thick and binding. Behind them, a massive LED screen displayed the Vortex logo spinning triumphantly. "Sign it, Derek," Jessica whispered, her voice amplified by the hot mic she forgot she was wearing. "Just sign it so we can go." Derek picked up the gold fountain pen. He lowered the nib to the paper. The room held its breath. At the exact moment the pen touched the page, the massive screen behind them flickered violently. The spinning logo froze. The blue background turned a jarring, alarm red. Massive black letters appeared, 10 feet high, scrolling across the display. "Warning system lockdown. Intellectual property dispute detected." A gasp went through the audience. Derek froze. He looked back at the screen, then frantically at the tech crew in the wings. "Cut the feed!" he screamed. "Cut the video!" But the screen changed again. It now displayed a legal document, the original patent filing with my name, Rachel, highlighted in neon yellow, and a timestamp from 12 years ago. I stood up slowly. The spotlight seemed to naturally find me. "You cannot sell what you do not own. Derek," I declared, my voice ringing out in the stunned silence of the ballroom. "That source code belongs to me, and I do not consent to this sale." Mr. Sterling dropped his pen. It clattered loudly onto the wooden stage. He looked at the screen, then at Derek, his eyes narrowing into slits of pure fury. "Derek," Sterling said. his voice low and dangerous. "Care to explain why your wife's name is on the copyright of the product you are selling me?" Derek stammered, his face draining of color. It is a mistake, a glitch. She hacked the system." "She is crazy." "The only glitch," I said, walking toward the stairs of the stage, "is you thinking you were the one in charge?" "Security!" Derek shrieked, his voice cracking under the strain of his panic. He pointed a trembling finger at me, veins bulging in his neck. "Get this woman off the stage immediately. She is trespassing." "She is trying to sabotage this company because she is bitter about our divorce. Someone grab her." 2 security guards started to move toward the stairs, but they stopped dead in their tracks when a tall, imposing figure stepped out from the shadows of the wings. It was Harrison, my attorney, holding a leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to crack a skull. I gave him a curt nod. He walked past the confused guards and handed me a thick binder. "You don't need security." "Derek," I said, my voice amplified by the microphone I had taken from the podium. "You need a criminal defense lawyer." I opened the binder and held up a document for the front row to see. "This is the original certificate of incorporation," I announced, turning to face the stunned audience. "And this is the amended operating agreement, dated 10 years ago. If you look at Article 9, Section C, you will see a clause that Derek evidently never bothered to read. It states that any transaction, merger, or asset liquidation exceeding $1 million requires the written consent of the golden shareholder. I hold that share, and I veto this sale." That is a lie," Derek stammered, grabbing the edge of the desk to steady himself. "These are forged. I am the CEO." "You are a figurehead," I corrected him coldly, "and a thief." I flipped the page. "Mr. Sterling, before you signed that check, did you know that $2 million of the acquisition fee was designated as a consulting bonus to be paid to a shell company in the Cayman Islands?" I signaled to the tech team, who were now following my orders, not Derek's. The screen behind me changed to show a complex web of bank transfers. This entity, JS Strategic Solutions, was registered 3 weeks ago, I explained, pointing to the screen. The initials stand for Jessica Summers. The sole beneficiary is Derek Vance. A collective gasp swept through the room. "Mr. Sterling looked at the screen, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. He turned his glare onto Jessica. Jessica, realizing the ship was sinking, immediately burst into tears. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. She clutched her chest, her mascara running down her cheeks. "I didn't know," she wailed, sobbing into her hands. I am just a secretary. Derek forced me to sign those papers. He said I would lose my job if I didn't help him. Please." "I am a victim here." I looked at her with zero sympathy. I pulled out my phone and held it up to the microphone. "Is that so?" "Jessica," I asked, because this recording from the ladies' room last week suggests otherwise. I pressed play. Jessica's voice, sharp and mocking, boomed through the speakers of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom. "Those old donkeys on the board are so stupid. They won't notice a thing. We take the kickback, dump the stock, and be on a beach in Bora Bora while they are left holding the bag. God, I can't wait to stop pretending to be nice to them." The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Every single shareholder in the room, the old donkeys she had mocked, was staring at her with burning hatred. Jessica stopped crying instantly, her face freezing in a mask of horror. "Mr. Sterling stood up. He picked up the Memorandum of Understanding, the document that was supposed to make Derek rich. With slow, deliberate movements, he tore it in half. Then he tore it again. He threw the confetti-like pieces into Derek's face. "The deal is off," Sterling growled, his voice shaking with rage. "And my legal team will be in touch first thing in the morning. I don't tolerate fraud, and I certainly don't do business with amateurs." "Mr. Sterling, wait. Please," Derek begged, reaching out, but Sterling swatted his hand away and stormed off the stage. The dam broke. The room erupted into chaos. "Resign!" someone shouted from the back. "Criminals!" Another voice yelled, "Get them out of here!" Derek stood center stage, bathed in the harsh spotlight, completely alone. The sweat was pouring down his face now, soaking through his expensive tuxedo shirt. He looked left and right, searching for an escape, for an ally, for anything. But there was nothing. He looked at me, his eyes wide with the terrifying realization that he was not the king of the castle anymore. He was just a man who had played a high-stakes game against the house, and he had lost everything. "It is over, Derek," I said softly, just loud enough for him to hear over the booing crowd. "Checkmate!" Derek made a desperate move toward the side exit, his instinct for self-preservation finally kicking in, but he did not make it 3 steps. The heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open, and a team of 6 officers from the Economic Crimes Unit marched in. They moved with the precision of a tactical team, cutting through the confused crowd to surround the stage. I had coordinated their arrival with Harrison precisely 2 hours ago, providing the police with enough evidence to secure an immediate warrant. "Derek Vance and Jessica Summers," the lead detective boomed, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd without the need for a microphone. "You are under arrest for corporate embezzlement, forgery of financial instruments, and grand larceny." The color drained from Jessica's face, leaving her looking like a ghost in a red dress. She let out a sound that was half scream, half sob, and recoiled from Derek as if he were radioactive. "It wasn't me!" she shrieked, clutching the detective's arm with frantic hands. "He made me do it! Please, I am just an employee. He threatened to fire me if I didn't sign the papers. I didn't want to steal anything. I am the victim here." Derek looked at her, his mouth hanging open in sheer disbelief at how quickly she had turned on him. But before he could argue, the officer spun him around and slammed him against the edge of the stage. The cold, metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut echoed through the silent room. Desperation flooded Derek's eyes. He looked at the police, then at the angry mob of shareholders who were filming the entire scene on their phones, and finally, he locked eyes with me. "Rachel," he pleaded, his voice trembling and wet with tears. "Rachel, baby, please. Don't let them take me. Think about Lily. I am her father. You can't let your daughter grow up knowing her daddy is in prison. Please. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. We can fix this. Do it for our little girl." A hush fell over the room. Everyone waited to see if the mention of my child would break my resolve. I looked down at him from the edge of the stage. The mention of my daughter's name in his mouth felt like a violation. I stepped closer, leaning down so he could see the absolute lack of mercy in my eyes. "You are not a father," I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through the air like a knife. "A father protects his family's future. He doesn't sell it for a quick payout to run away with his mistress. You are not Lily's dad anymore, Derek. You are just an expensive lesson I had to pay so she could have a better life." I nodded to the officers. They hauled Derek and Jessica away. The press, sensing blood in the water, swarmed the exit. Dozens of phones and professional cameras flashed, live streaming the image of the disgraced CEO and his secretary being dragged out in their gala finery. I turned back to the room. The silence was heavy, filled with shock and uncertainty. The screen behind me still displayed the warning message. I walked to the podium and adjusted the microphone. I did not shake. I did not cry. I stood tall. Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice clear and projecting strength. "I apologize for the disruption tonight. The actions of the former CEO do not reflect the values or the stability of this company, effective immediately. I am reinstating myself as Chief Executive Officer. We will correct the financial records. We will cooperate fully with the authorities. And we will rebuild the trust that was broken here tonight. Vortex Innovations is under new management." For a second, nobody moved. Then, Mr. Sterling started to clap. It was a slow, rhythmic applause. Then the board members joined in. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet, the applause thundering against the walls. They were not clapping out of politeness. They were clapping because they knew the captain had finally returned to the bridge. The morning after the gala, I convened an emergency board meeting at 8 o'clock sharp. The conference room felt different this time. The air was clear, and the seats that used to be occupied by Derek's sycophants were empty. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I formally terminated the employment of every single executive who had conspired with Derek or turned a blind eye to his embezzlement. They left the building in silence, carrying their boxes, looking far less arrogant than they had the day before. Vortex Innovations was a name chosen by a man who only cared about spinning in circles to show off. I told the remaining loyal staff and the board members, "From this moment forward, we are Phoenix Dynamics. We are rising from the ashes." The legal fallout was swift and brutal. Jessica tried to play the victim until the very end, but the evidence was overwhelming. The court ordered the seizure of her assets to pay back the funds she had helped steal. I heard she had to sell every single designer handbag, every piece of jewelry, and even her car. It was not enough. She was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit fraud. I can't go to jail," she had sobbed to her lawyer as the bailiff led her away. "I don't belong there." Derek fared even worse. Because he was the ringleader and had abused his position of trust as a CEO, the judge showed no leniency. He received a sentence of 8 years in a medium-security penitentiary. The humiliation of being stripped of his suits, his title, and his freedom was a punishment far greater than the time he would serve. I did not visit them. I had other things to do. I put the suburban mansion on the market. It was a beautiful house, but the walls held too many memories of a marriage that had been a lie. I sold it within a week and used the proceeds to buy a modern penthouse in the heart of the city. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, open spaces, and 0 ghosts. With the company profitable again under my leadership, I launched a new initiative. I used a portion of our quarterly profits to establish the Founders Shield Fund. It was a non-profit program designed to teach female entrepreneurs about corporate law, equity structures, and how to protect their intellectual property. I wanted to ensure that no brilliant woman would ever be pushed into the shadows of her own creation again. One afternoon, 6 months later, I was sitting in my office on the top floor. The name, Phoenix Dynamics, was emblazoned on the wall behind me. I had just signed off on a massive contract for our new cloud security protocol, a deal that was honest, transparent, and twice as lucrative as the one Derek had tried to steal. My personal phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the screen. It was a text message from a blocked number, but the preview showed the location as the state correctional facility. "Rachel, please, the public defender is useless. I need money for an appeal. I know you still care. We were a family." I looked at the words. A year ago, that message might have made me cry. It might have made me feel guilty. Now, I just felt a profound sense of indifference. He was still trying to manipulate me, still thinking he had some hold over my heart. "Goodbye, Derek," I whispered. I tapped the screen, selected Block Contact permanently, and deleted the thread. I spun my chair around to look out at the Chicago skyline. The sky was a brilliant, piercing blue. The weight that had pressed down on my shoulders for a decade was gone. My life was finally, truly my own. I left the office early that day. I drove to Lily's school and waited by the gate. When she ran out and saw me, her face lit up with a joy that was worth more than any stock option. "Mommy!" she yelled, jumping into my arms. "You came early." "I did?" I said, hugging her tight. "I thought we could go get ice cream, double scoops." "Really?" she gasped. Can I get sprinkles? You can have all the sprinkles you want, I promised. We walked down the street hand in hand, the sun warming our faces. I looked down at my daughter, laughing as she tried to catch a drip of chocolate ice cream before it hit her chin. That smile was my victory. The company was mine. The money was mine. But this peace, this was the only revenge that mattered. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on how I handled Derek and Jessica. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.